All right, everybody, welcome back to the Steel City Blitz Steelers Podcast presented by Deck Roofing Incorporated of South Florida. Your Pittsburgh Steelers are now 2-0 on the season. And if, look, it's 2-0. You don't care how you get to 2-0 in the NFL. You take it and you run with it. That doesn't mean that the team is playing flawlessly, because there's plenty of things that could stand some improvement. And there's some things that are going very, very well. And that's where you are after two games, especially after two games when you've had no preseason work whatsoever. And, of course, this week they get the Houston Texans coming into town. And, here with me to discuss all that are Ian and Ben. And Ben, things are a little bit better out there in the Pacific Northwest. Not as much craziness with forest fires going on, right?
Yeah, they're good. I mean, things are under control anyway.
Well, that's all you can ask for. Yeah.
Yep.
And Ian, things going as well as can be in the Steel City.
Yeah, things are good here. Steelers are 2-0, and as far as the sort of opening up of stadiums and such, we got some good news today that Allegheny County basically eliminated their restrictions that they had put in place, which were stricter than the state restrictions on gathering limits. So not only does that potentially reopen, bars, restaurants, place of business, but also, stadiums for games, including Heinz Field. And that's kind of a statewide thing that both Pittsburgh and Philadelphia had said no fans in either the Steelers or Eagles games for the month of September, but we're getting to the end of September here. So that may come to a change here shortly. We'll keep our eyes on that.
What are they talking about percentage wise? How many fans in?
They haven't even said a number yet. No, it's been a back and forth thing. Without getting into too much detail, there was a lawsuit between some of the counties and the governor, and the federal court found in favor of the counties that the governor's gathering limit restrictions were unconstitutional under the Assembly Clause. And then simultaneously, the state legislature passed a bill to allow school districts to make a decision on how many fans could be allowed at high school events. And then the governor vetoed that bill. But the current belief and understanding is that the federal court's unconstitutional ruling is more important than the governor's veto of that bill. So basically, school districts can still decide, or organizations and institutions like the Steelers could decide on what they want the gathering limit to be and how many people they're going to let in. So this is kind of the first weekend that, from a high school standpoint, stadiums are opening up a little bit more beyond parents. Some stadiums are talking about letting in 1,000, 2,000 people. So we'll see as it develops. But I'd imagine that the Steelers will come out with something relatively soon on a policy for fans this season, because there were some fans that had season tickets that held on to them and didn't sell them back. So I'm not sure how it's going to work for those fans, but we'll keep our eye on that and report back when something happens.
It's been fascinating, frustrating, all of the superlatives there, and my son will finally get to kick his season off. At least I hope so. They were canceled last week because of a positive test, and it's basically just parents only. Everybody gets two vouchers to get in, every player, I should say, and every coach, and so it's going to be sparse in the stands, but it's a good start, and I'll take it. The Steelers are fresh off of a 26-21 win over the Denver Broncos. And Ben, just give me your general thoughts on what you saw on Sunday from the black and gold here.
Well,
dramatic pause.
Who's cracking a beer?
Yeah,
I was. Initially, they came out and they looked all right. Not great. It was a little sloppy, but I was like, okay, it's a little sloppy, but it's early.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we've been talking about for the first few weeks or a month. Nobody's going to play great football. I just don't see that, with rare exception. I mean, you look at what the Chiefs did this weekend, and they struggled and needed overtime to beat the Chargers, who we're starting a quarterback who'd never started an NFL game before.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Saints, the vaunted Saints, went to the lowly Las Vegas Raiders and lost.
Mm-hmm.
Drew Brees looks mortal. Everybody just is a
Absolutely.
little sloppy right now, and that's kind of what we expected. And I think later on in the season, Denver is going to do some good things, although they're pretty beat up right now after the Steelers game. But they're going to do some good things, and people are going to look back at this loss and go, loss. They're going to look back at this game and go, that isn't a game that we would have been ashamed to lose now, because this is a better team than we thought they were when they came into Pittsburgh at 0-1. But late in the game, there were some mental errors. In particular, Terrell Edmunds, who had a couple of huge gaffes, just inexplicable, just unexcusable nonsense on the defense. And it's like things like that where one guy blows an assignment can
it's all it takes.
Everything. And end up with a score. So he did it. He got that sack early on in the game. He almost had a pick. He was in a position to make a pick. He dropped it. I was encouraged by that early in the game because even though he didn't make the play, he was in a position to do so. And I was like, that's an improvement. That's a step forward. And I like that. So I was encouraged early on. And then he had that sack later. And I was like, he had a pretty decent game. And then I watched the film and I was like, oh my God, he was terrible. Seriously, because you can't really see the defensive backfield.
No,
when you're looking
that's
at
true.
TV view. You can't really tell whose fault it is. You can't really get a sense for what has transpired and how the routes all developed and who had who until you look at the film and watch it that way. And watching that, Edmunds was awful, man. He was terrible and is clearly the weakest link of the defense. Mike Hilton had a huge game. Tuitt and Hayward were monsters all day long. TJ Watt had a nice game. Bud Dupree continues to impress. It's too bad he's going to be gone next year.
Yes, he is.
It looked, when I was watching the game, like Devin Bush was getting victimized a little bit. That wasn't the case. He was just put in some bad positions from a coverage standpoint because of mental errors made by Edmunds, and looked bad in the end. Vince Williams still can't cover. It is what it is, but he is a reliable tackler, good blitzer. I like having him around. Smart player. Defense looks good. I thought
Vince Williams is leading the league in tackles for loss right now.
Cool. I thought that Dotson played a really nice game. Really nice game.
Yeah.
He was particularly impressive in short yardage, but we knew he was going to be a road grader. Yeah, we knew he was going to be a road grader as a run blocker, and no surprise, he is. Chuks Okorafor, nice game, really nice game.
Yeah.
Now, granted, he wasn't going against great competition this week, but it was a nice game. He's got his work cut out for him this week with Watt, who lines up all over the place, and he's going to they're going to put him against the weakest player. They're the guy they perceive to be the weakest player. So with Okorafor being kind of more of a finesse tackle, I would expect them to line up Watt against him quite a bit this week. Filer, not all that great in pass coverage, I didn't think. Al looked pretty okay. He's still a solid technician. Ben did not have his best day, and he acknowledged that after the game.
He did. Very hard on himself.
Threw some balls behind receivers who made the play anyway. Receivers all looked good. Eric Ebron cannot block to save his life.
No, he cannot.
Dropped the ball too. That really pretty much. Oh, James Conner. I'd be remiss if I did not mention that James Conner had a pretty nice game. I still don't see the burst that I'm used to seeing out of him. I still wonder if that ankle is gimpy and if it hasn't been for a while. I don't think he's quite 100%, but he had a nice game. He really did. Benny Snell, that fumble was potentially really costly. Really, really
2
costly.
weeks in a row.
Yeah, he needs to get that together, man. There's no way he should be a starter right now. I hope everybody realizes that.
No, I agree. You can't be doing that.
No.
Ian, what is your takeaway from Sunday's win?
So most importantly, and let's keep this in mind because we've talked a lot on the podcast before about how, without a preseason, the whole month of September really was like an extended preseason, and you just wanted to stack as many wins as possible. Sure. So the two most important things that happened in this game were that we won the game, unlike which sounds like obvious, but the way that Twitter reacted, you would think that we did what the Saints did and lost by 10 when we actually won the game and are 2-0. So we won the game most importantly, but second, and almost equally as important, we didn't have any significant injuries. And given the more or less bloodbath around the league of season-ending injuries, specifically like soft tissue ACL injuries, we had a couple bumps and bruises, as Mike Tomlin would say, that comes with playing in the National Football League, but nothing, no season-ending injuries at this point in time.
You're right about that. Although Juju has not practiced the last 2 days because of a knee injury. There's now a question about whether or not he's going to play on Sunday. So, and he had that same knee injury last year. So I don't know. I'm a little bit leery about it because he's already had that injury history. So,
So tomorrow becomes a huge day.
But like Denver, who we played, lost Cortland Sutton for the whole season.
ACL.
And their quarterback separated his shoulder, or sprained his AC joint, whatever. So, given that perspective, and they'd already lost a couple guys on defense coming into the week. So, given that perspective, and what happened with San Francisco, and the Giants with Saquon Barkley going down, and Carolina, not that Carolina was going anywhere, but Christian McCaffrey, which was really the only reason worth watching Carolina this season's out for several weeks. So it was a bad week for injuries, and we're lucky that we escaped without any really, really significant ones or season-ending ones. So small bumps and bruises, yes, but no significant season-ending injuries.
I will echo one thing real quickly, and then I'll let you keep going. Since you brought up the injuries, Drew Lock, the way that he was injured on that play, everyone should go back and look at it if you have an opportunity and see what a quarterback is not supposed to do in that situation. There was no way for him to get out of there and get rid of that ball. He had no opportunity to protect it or himself. He should have just gone down.
Yeah.
And that's why he lost both the ball and separated his AC joint, sprained his AC joint. And he's going to be out for a little while. That was really, really dumb play by the young quarterback.
That's an experience thing, don't you think, though? I mean, he started, 6 games now? 7?
Yeah, I just get the sense that he's a little bit careless. He's a little bit carefree. And, when you're a young quarterback and you're Ben Roethlisberger size, you're 6'5", and you weigh 250, you can get away with that crap because you're so strong that it doesn't matter. If you're Cam Newton or Ben Roethlisberger, you can get away with that, careless kind of stuff. If you're not, you can't. So you just can't do it. And maybe in college you can get away with that crap, but in the NFL, you're going to get smacked.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, Ian.
Yeah.
So Ben covered a lot of the specifics. So I won't. I agree with everything he said. I'll also add that Chase Claypool was really good.
He's a decent young man. Yeah,
he is a decent young man.
2 catches, but they were money.
Yes. Yes. I want to talk about play calling, which offensively was bad. How many times do we need to see a draw play on 2nd and 10, second
3rd and 18 was awesome.
Yeah. Denver got back into the game in the second half, partially because we went into an offensive shell from a play calling standpoint. Yes, Ben Roethlisberger made some poor decisions, especially on the interception, was just a terrible decision. Some credit to Denver there that they had really good coverage on the play.
They did.
But, I went back and rewatched that from the All-22, and the receivers were blanketed. Ben's really only choice would have been to try and chuck it deep for Deontay on the 3rd and 5, or to check it down, but on 3rd and 15 from midfield. I understand what Ben was thinking, try and get the first down, try and get us into field goal range, but it was a poor decision and an even worse throw.
Yeah, he threw it short and inside, and it was just bad.
Yeah,
bad.
Yeah. Ben got away with a couple other throws that were questionable. I will say the touchdown to Deontay Johnson. Probably if they don't have a undrafted free agent cornerback trying to cover him, it might get intercepted.
Yeah,
but
I thought so too.
That's also a throw that only Ben Roethlisberger makes. We talked a lot last year about how Mason Rudolph was afraid to throw the ball if guys weren't Big 12 open. If they were just NFL open, he wasn't throwing it. How Duck Hodges had the intestinal fortitude to throw the ball, but didn't have the arm strength or accuracy to get it anywhere close. So that's the kind of throw that Ben Roethlisberger is the only quarterback on our roster capable of making. And he's always played like that. He's always been a gunslinger and always taking those chances. And you're going to get touchdowns and you're going to get picks. And we got a touchdown this time. And if you want those touchdowns, you got to be willing to live with the picks. So it is what it is. The one other thing I'll say is the defense did give up some big plays. But the one thing that was really cool to see in this game was it seemed like after every time they gave up a big play, they came up with their own big play right afterwards, whether it was even, giving up a 3rd down conversion, then the next play they either got a sack or, a tackle for a loss on a running play or something to set Denver back. Denver hit a long pass down the field and got into field goal range, and we got 2 sacks to knock them back out of field goal range.
I concur. I never felt like this game was going out of control. I mean, I talked to people on Twitter this week who were like, no, they almost lost. Well, first of all, almost losing is called winning. And it's like almost being late is called being on time.
Yeah.
And second, it just seemed like exactly what Ian said. Every time they screwed up, they'd come back with a big play. Mentally, they were never out of it. They never lost momentum. And I was like, okay, so you guys made mistakes and you came right back and hit them in the mouth. And that's what I liked about this defense. And it was like, we're never out of games because of this D. And it's still early. They're not even hitting their peak yet.
No, totally agree.
Yep.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
2 other closing thoughts real quick. Denver was a 7-9 team last year, so they were not. This was not a terrible squad. This was not a 5-11 Chargers team that we got taken to overtime by. That and a lot of people on Twitter were. I think from what I saw, Steelers fans reacted worse than Chiefs fans did getting taken to overtime by the Chargers, or than Saints fans did for losing to friggin' Raiders. So. Take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
I think part of it is that Baltimore looks so good at this point in the year that people are freaking out about that. But remember, Baltimore has a very unique and difficult offense to defend. That's not an offense that you see every week. And so far this year, teams that have been able to come out and run the ball have been some of the most successful teams just because of that lack of practice time, that there wasn't a preseason to prepare. And like we talked about, Drew Brees looks mortal. A lot of these other quarterbacks are having trouble with timing and accuracy in the passing game, and that stuff will come around as the season goes on. But for right now, really the teams that are looking good are the ones that can run the ball and run the ball effectively, like Baltimore. But as we've seen time and time again, you don't want to peak in September. You want to peak in December and January. So Baltimore might look
like
Thanksgiving. Yeah, Baltimore might look like the team to beat right now, but let's see what happens when we get to the end of the year and who's hot then, because the complexion of this league changes every 3 to 4 weeks, and with injuries that can happen. The one other thing I'll mention, since Ben talked about how terrible Terrell Edmunds was, and he was awful, it was not lost on me that even though he made the essentially game-saving play with that sack, the Steelers, whether it was intentional or unintentional, took their worst coverage player out of coverage and sent him on a blitz at the biggest moment in the game. Now, he made the play. Credit to him. He made the play, got the sack, but they also took him out of coverage at the most important play of the game.
Well, I did just want to mention, real quick, we talked a little bit about injuries and stuff. Baltimore did lose Tavon Young, their cornerback. He's out for the season. So the injury bug is getting everybody. Might not have necessarily been in week 2. Obviously we lost Zach Banner in week 1, but so it is everywhere. Let's stay on Edmunds for a minute. It's no secret that people constantly harp on the fact that we never should have taken him. There were so many guys we could have taken, blah, blah, blah. It is what it is. He was the Steelers' first round draft pick 3 years ago. And Ben, where are we with this guy? Because he didn't play well. He's become a liability in coverage. I mean, where are you? I mean, are you ready to just throw the towel in, or are you going to give this guy a little more rope here?
Well, I mean, personally, I don't think it's time to move on from him. He's too talented. The issues that Edmunds is having are mental mistakes, and it's a theme. It's continual. So it makes you wonder if the light bulb's ever gonna pop and it's all of a sudden go on and like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it now. He's heading into Artie Burns territory, where the team is going to make a decision and bring in somebody to compete with him, some journeyman strong safety.
Yeah.
And that guy may beat him out because he's sound from an assignment standpoint, and Edmunds is not. And that same thing basically happened to Burns. He got beat out by a corner. Yeah. That isn't a good corner by any stretch of the imagination. He's really a guy who should be a backup, but he beat out Burns anyway because he didn't make mental mistakes. And the same thing may happen, not this year, but next with Edmunds, in my opinion. So, we'll see. And if that happens, they got to make a decision on his 5th-year option this year.
Yeah. This is a 4th year, right? Yeah.
No, it's 3rd.
Oh, it's just 3rd. Okay, so we'll have to make this. Okay, yeah.
You make it after the 3rd year.
That's right.
So, I'm not ready to say this guy's trash. It is still early in the season where there's been no preseason. There wasn't a whole lot of team activity this year, but he looks sloppy. He played one of the worst games he's ever played on Sunday.
Just to add to that too, he played bad, and the Steelers were doing things to try and shield him in coverage. They played him a lot, sort of underneath in the middle, and almost that at the linebacker level. And a lot of times it was either Minka as a single high or sort of a cover 3 look with Hayden and Nelson out on the corners, or the other thing they did was there were times when Vince Williams went off and they brought Cam Sutton in, and Cam Sutton essentially played like the second safety role in a cover 2, and Edmunds was still down in the box. So it wasn't only that Edmunds played bad, but he wasn't even like playing as a deep safety all that often. A lot of his game was in the box, and he still played that bad.
Well, and I'll stay with you. Is his play, and this is kind of a rhetorical question based on the film breakdown that you did and what we've all seen, but is his play starting to affect other players?
Yes and no. I mean, when we talked about this last week when we interviewed Levon Kirkland, and he talked about that when you have faith in the other guys on the defense, you're willing to take more chances up front because the other guys will be there to cover for you in the back. And the problem is, if you don't have that faith, if you don't have that trust, if you don't know the other guys are capable, you're then going to essentially run yourself out of position by trying to do too much, which was what happened to Ryan Shazier a lot early in his career, that he was trying to do too much. He was trying to cover for people who stunk and make plays all over, and actually running himself out of the play. So the defense as a whole has to work together as a cohesive unit. And I will say that since Mike Mitchell's been gone, the communication has been much better. But because when Mitchell was around, we always heard, big plays with miscommunication. We're running the right things. We have miscommunications. Well, with Minkah back there, the communications issues aren't nearly as bad as they were. It's decision making. Like Noah Fant's TD, we were talking about it a little bit off the air. That Edmunds was lined up on him with outside position and just stood his ground and passed him off. And Devin Bush had to come from the inside hash marks to try and run down Fant all the way at the pylon on an out route. And there's no way. Devin Bush is fast, but there's no way he's making that ground up against the guy like Noah Fant. And Edmunds had the correct position in the correct spot. He had a hand on Fant. All he had to do was turn and run with them. And he passed him off and decided to double team a running back coming out of the backfield and let Fant run by him wide open, hoping that Devin Bush would make it over from the inside hash mark. Like, if you just watched it on TV, you were like, "Oh, that was Devin Bush's guy.
Right.
He's too."
No, you're right. You're right.
Bad coverage. But then when you watch the All-22 and you see what Edmunds did, you're like, "Holy crap! That is not Devin Bush's fault at all. Like, that was all on Edmunds."
Well, exactly. So Ben, how do you proceed? They're not going to sit him. Do they continue to do more of what we saw at the end of the game when he came off the edge, take him out of coverage, let him attack? Because it's clear he's a liability.
I imagine they are probably going to have him blitz a little more often, and maybe that will improve his confidence and make him play better. I don't know. His straight line speed is outstanding. We all know this.
Yep.
He is a good blitzer. He can make plays. He can contribute that way. That is something you can do. Really, the big thing that sticks out to me about this is our safety depth is not great. Okay? You got Sean Davis behind him, though. And I got to wonder. I mean, there was a point where I thought Sean Davis, especially in run support, was an excellent strong safety. You got to wonder.
I agree with that.
At this point, do you say, yeah, Sean, we're going to give you a shot, and we're going to see where this goes, and, maybe we made a mistake here, and we don't give this guy his fifth-year option, and we have you guys fight it out next season and see who the starter is going to be. And maybe at some point, especially if Edmunds doesn't play better than he did on Sunday, maybe at some point this year he loses his spot to Davis. Because, again, Davis also not great in coverage, but not that bad. I mean, God, it was awful.
And every week, the NFL has good tight ends, and every week you see one. But, now this week you've got another guy coming in, Brandon Fells, who's off to a real nice start, despite Houston's 0-2 start. He's had a very nice start to the year. And, man, he's a tall drink of water. He's another guy that gets places quickly. Yeah. And I mean, so you got to think, if you're Bill O'Brien, you're figuring out how do I utilize him the way that, the Giants kind of utilized Ingram, and then definitely how the Broncos utilized Fant. So I have to believe that's going to be a huge issue coming forward with that. But, it's going to be interesting. And I don't mean to say that this defense isn't playing well, because it is. But as you guys both touched on, it's also not anywhere near where it's going to be. And it does have some things to clean up, as Coach Tomlin likes to talk about. I do want to flip it over to offense and talk a little bit about Benny Snell, because, when he came off that Giants game where he came in and Connor was dinged up and he rushes for 118 yards. And, I really thought, man, if Connor's dinged up, how do you not start this kid? And, then he comes out early and fumbles, and it's like, well, that's how you get yourself off the field real fast. Ian, do you think he's, Tomlin's just going to stick with Connor and run the wheels off type thing until, Snell can prove he can hang on to the football?
I think Tomlin's always been a guy to stick with his lead back, and this game in particular, especially coming off that Giants game when Snell was so good, was definitely a show of faith in James Conner, sometimes to a little to a detrimental aspect that, you know, they ran the ball on 3rd and 2 from the 2-yard line and didn't even get close to the end zone and they'd already gotten James Conner 1 touchdown, but, you know, it seemed like they really wanted Conner to go off and show faith in him, you know, get him a touchdown or 2, get him those short yardage carries, use them as much as they could. And Snell's fumble definitely played a factor in that. But I think the best case scenario for this offense is one where Conner gets 15 to 17 carries and Snell gets 5 or so a game, and you know, where they can share the load a little bit. You know, let Snell pick up some of those short yardage carries, some of those ones where you have to go and bang in there a little bit, save some of the abuse on Conner's body, because as we've seen, he's not a durable guy. So he's not going to be able to take that abuse for a 16-game season. You're going to need Snell at some point this year, and it would be better if he had some kind of rhythm rather than just, you know, giving him 1 or 2 carries a week and then hoping he can come in and start a game for you if Conner gets hurt. So it would be better if they could, you know, distribute it a little more and share the load. By the way, Benny Snell had a great block on Chase Claypool's touchdown. If you go back and watch it, there's a free linebacker that comes right up the middle, and Snell gets just enough of him to give Ben time to get that ball out to Claypool. And that's how you get on the field more. Even if you're fumbling, that's how you get on the field more, is plays like that, like being able to block, because Jalen Samuels cannot block at all to save his life. So if Snell's going to get on the field, he's got to do those little things too, like showing he can blitz pick up points in the game too.
No, it's a great point, and it was a good pickup on the touchdown to Claypool. Ben, go ahead and address Snell, but also too, when you're done with that, if you choose to, the debut of Kevin Dotson too. Talk a little bit about what we saw from the rookie at right guard.
Well, Dotson already looks like a competent NFL offensive guard.
He does.
And that was his first start in rookie season. I was really impressed. Not so much by his dominant play, although at times as a running blocker especially, he was dominant. But the fact that he didn't make any mental mistakes. He was very aware on that Deontay Johnson touchdown, for example.
Yeah. He
saw Ben rolling out to the right and running forward, and he wasn't sure what Ben was doing, but he decided to run downfield with him because he saw him. And he was like, yeah, whatever my quarterback's doing, I'm going to run down there with him and make sure that, you know, he's got somebody protecting him. It was heady stuff like that. There was a touchdown James Conner put in, and he chipped Chukes Okorafor's man, and then took his own man out and shoved him into the end zone. It was like, this guy already looks like he could be a starter for a long time, and he's a rookie.
Yeah.
So I would expect that next year that's your left guard, and that, you know, they move forward, probably draft another center or guard or both.
Yeah.
And let Matt Filer take off, because Filer's going to get a pretty good offer. And if you've got a guy who's going to be better than Filer already in-house in the fold, why hang on to Filer? You know, unless you can keep him for depth, but I don't think you can. As far as Snell, that's what you want me to talk about?
Well, if you had any thoughts on it, Ian covered it pretty well, and I didn't want to make sure you had a chance. Yeah,
I think, you know, he covered it very well. Snell did some good things, but ball security continues to be an issue, and can't be. You can't be a running back and put the ball on the ground. Jalen Samuels, since we're on the subject of running backs, continues to disappoint.
Yeah.
Rookie year really looked like we had a guy that was going to be able to do little things that nobody else could do. The last 2 seasons, he hasn't been much to write home about. And I really expected that this year healthy coming in, knowing the scheme, knowing the system,
Mm-hmm.
knowing the players, knowing all the pieces that he was going to be better and bounce back. To this point, he really hasn't. Nothing to be impressed by. Anthony McFarland, we still haven't seen.
No.
Everybody needs to bear in mind that he's barely 5'9", weighs 190 pounds, cannot pick up the blitz,
right?
Basically is what we're being told. That's why he's not going to be playing on passing downs. At some point, I expect him to get some reps, but, don't be disappointed if he doesn't get anything in September. It is what it is. He's a low man in the rotation right now. So, but yeah, I expect Snell. He's got the right attitude. I expect him to
definitely
clean that up, be a little more careful. We're not talking about Rashard Mendenhall here, where he carries the ball away from his body.
Yeah, a whole too
Speaking of ball security and carrying it away from your body, though, Deontay Johnson is the left-hand player on the team with the ball in his hands, but he's also the guy that scares me the most with the ball in his hands. And when we talked about this, actually, pat myself on the back a little bit. I mentioned this on the preseason podcast when we said what can go wrong for this team, and I said Ben threw 16 interceptions his last season that he played a full season, which he's only thrown one this year, and that was on a bad throw. He's fine. But the other guy I mentioned was Deontay Johnson, who fumbled 5 times last year, and he's already put it on the ground a few times. So that's definitely an area that needs cleaned up.
I made that point after the season on social media, on Twitter, and people argued with me. Juju fumbled 1 time last year. Granted, it was in a big moment. He fumbled once.
Yep.
And Johnson fumbled 5 times as a rookie, and his fumble rate was like significantly higher. And you look at all the touches those guys had. It was 6 times what Juju's was. And people weren't concerned with that, but they were concerned with Juju fumbling because he shouldn't fumble. Well, he's fumbled twice in his career. I mean, come on, guys. Let's keep this in perspective. Where Johnson, he's already had some issues with fielding punts and with a fumble and end around. What is his deal like when he first comes into the game? Has he got jitters and
he
I
don't definitely looked nervous against the Giants.
And he looked nervous against the Broncos too. And it's like, you're coming around for an end around. It's a simple handoff and you drop it. Come on, man.
He reminds me of, remember the old baseball idea that when you've got that pitcher that he always has an awful first inning, but if you can get him through it, then he's just an ace the rest of the game. It's almost like you need to start Deontay in the hallway down there and say, hey, Deontay, it's the first quarter. Go ahead and get it out of your system.
Time to warm up now.
Because he does. He comes out so just all over the place. And so let me remind everybody that the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast is presented, if I can spit that out properly, by Deck Roofing Incorporated, serving Broward and the southern Palm Beach counties. Whether it's commercial, residential, multifamily, or condos, contact Deck Roofing today by visiting deckroofing.com. And hopefully our friends at Deck Roofing got the package I sent them this week. I haven't heard yet. A few shirts, koozies, decals, things like that. Either that or they're just completely ignoring me, which I would not like. The Houston, which also wouldn't surprise me. The Houston Texans come into town, guys, and look, they're 0-2. The first 2 weeks of the season, they played the Kansas City Chiefs, the defending Super Bowl champions, and then they had to host the Baltimore Ravens, and now they play the Steelers. So they have yet to play a team that has lost a game, and it's a hornet's nest for them. They've been giving up more pressure than any other team in the league, and now they got to play the Steelers. Whoa. Okay. So, Ian, what about these Houston Texans? What do the Steelers need to do to make sure they get a W on Sunday?
So the Texans have also given up over 30 points in both games and given up over 160 yards rushing in both games. So Houston's pass defense is actually okay, but their run defense is absolutely dreadful. So got to control the clock. And I mean, obviously we'll get pressure on Deshaun Watson. The thing that's different about Watson than the 2-3, I guess, quarterbacks we faced already is that he can make throws down the field with accuracy when he's on the move. And, you know, the other guys, you flush them out of the pocket, they weren't going to be able to hit guys down the field. Watson has a ton of arm strength and is kind of used to running for his life back there behind that dreadful offensive line.
Yes.
And is capable of making throws down the field. So I'm interested to see if we actually blitz less and just bring 4 more often than not, and maybe keep one guy back in the middle as kind of a spy to keep an eye on him from scrambling, or just to keep more guys back in coverage, because they've got speedy receivers in Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks that can, fly around the field and can definitely be matchup problems for our cornerbacks. And you already mentioned Fells, the tight end. They've got David Johnson, who was sort of the counterpart to Le'Veon Bell, did a lot of similar things when Johnson was in Arizona, and then Johnson had a couple knee injuries, wasn't quite the same, but looked decent in the opener against the Chiefs. But it's one of those things where Houston just got down by so much they had to completely abandon the run, and then just let both defenses really just tee off on them. So. But Watson really scrambling with his legs and making plays on the run is probably what scares me the most in this game. And if we can contain that and limit those opportunities that he has, and really the key is that when we have a shot at him, we have to get him on the ground. We can't let him scramble outside the pocket and make plays. We gotta just get him on the ground. Basically, when you have a chance to make a sack. And then when we're on offense, we should be able to run on this team. There's no question about that.
They are ranked 31st in the NFL against the run right now.
Well, and it's only 2 weeks into that season we talked about with no preseasons. That's not necessarily an accurate reflection of the situation.
Well, plus, they played Baltimore, who runs the ball a ton.
Who runs the ball very well. Exactly. They played Kansas City and Baltimore. They played probably the 2 best teams in the league, and they got their ass handed to them twice. Which is actually, that does a lot for a team's confidence. I mean, they kind of got their butts kicked. What the Steelers need to do is a few things. Number one, they need to come out right away and take the wind out of the Texans' sails immediately. The point I just made about them getting their butts kicked the first 2 weeks of the season, that can be, it can be really, really hard on your confidence. And what they need to do is capitalize on that and come out and hit them hard right away. Boom. And yes, I mean, obviously, they are not a great run defense. Their pass defense, who knows? Maybe it's okay. Maybe it's bad. They've lost some players too. They really haven't been tested in the air because it's kind of easy to run the ball, so why not just run the ball? The Steelers have got to establish the run, and they've got to pressure Watson on defense. The Texans are tied for the league lead right now in sacks allowed. So, the Steelers are undoubtedly going to get some sacks, get some pressure on Watson, move him around. Their tackles are terrible. I expect Watt and Dupree to have a really nice day. I also expect them to follow suit what the other 2 teams that the Steelers have played have done, and give more attention to Watt than to Dupree, which is dumb in as much as Dupree's going to win one-on-ones. And if you're going to give him one, he's going to get pressures continually. But I guess the feeling is that Watt is going to win one-on-ones even more easily, and the pressures are going to come too. So, pick your poison. I think that obviously Cam Hayward doesn't feel like any interior lineman can block him one-on-one in the league. He's flat out said that. Tuitt seems to be drawing a lot of double teams, and in doing so, he's freeing other people up. So, it's all good. From my standpoint, I don't expect them to blitz as much this week as they had the previous 2. But I expect a little blitzing. I expect even 4-man rushes to get home because that offensive line is terrible.
Yeah.
And
it's not good.
For Watson to be throwing the ball off of his spot, off his back foot, away from where he intended being when the play was drawn up, and having to make some tough throws. Now, he's got arm strength, as Ian pointed out. He can put the ball any place. So he's still dangerous. And if Edmunds misses assignments like he did last week, again this week, we're going to see some big plays given up. I mean, that's just an example. Anybody else could blow an assignment too, but if assignments are blown, he will take advantage. He's a smart quarterback. He's got a big arm. He's going to take advantage of it. If you make a mistake, you're going to lose that down. Offensively, I hope Ben settles down a little bit. Is more accurate this week than he was last. I thought that he regressed a little bit from week 1. That's not exactly accurate because the first quarter of the first game, he was pretty bad. Yeah. But then he settled down and he played better. It just seemed like against Denver that he took a few more chances, but he also had some bad throws that should have been picked. I saw at least 2 more throws where he should have been picked. And, as Ian pointed out, that's Ben. It's what he's always done. It's the way he's always played.
Yep.
But I hope he settles down just a little bit. And to his credit, he acknowledged that he did not play well and he needed to clean that up, right after the game. So he knew what was going on. And as Tomlin pointed out, the team as a whole has some lessons to learn. They got some things they need to work out and clean up. But it's nice to learn those lessons and still get a win.
And win.
Yeah.
Well, you've used the term sloppy several times, and that to me is a very appropriate word because I see them doing a lot of good things, but I also see some sloppiness. I see some things that I know as players bothers them, and they want to take care of that. But also too, and you guys both said this, nobody wants to peak in September or October.
Nope.
You want to be playing well, of course, but you really want to be playing well once you get out of Thanksgiving and into December. So, if these are things that can get cleaned up, then all the better. Ian, any parting shots on tonight?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that power rankings don't matter. That the Steelers are not playing for a BCS or college football playoff committee that's going to rank them based on how many points they win by. Like Ben said, a win is a win, and we're going to look back. In December, we're not going to look back at this game and say, "Oh no, the Steelers only beat the Broncos by 5. They should have smoked that team." We're going to look back and say, boy, I'm glad we have that win under our belts. That's really helping our playoff positioning right now. So a victory is a victory any way you slice it. And it's, getting a win in the NFL is not always easy. I mean, the Chiefs got taken to overtime by the Chargers. Yep. So it's, like we said, we got the win. Not a lot of guys got no serious injuries, got a couple small bumps and bruises, but the Steelers haven't started the season strong a ton lately, and that's worth noting. That this is a 2-0 start is not something to be taken for granted either. That this is not something that happens to us every single year. And I mentioned on Twitter that this is just the 7th 2-0 start by the Steelers in the Ben Roethlisberger era. And this is 17 years for Ben now?
Yes.
And so just to real quick go through the previous 2-0 starts. 2005, we started 2-0, won the Super Bowl that year. 2007, we started 2-0, we won the division that year. 2008, we started 2-0, won the Super Bowl that year. Also, 2010, we started 2-0, went to the Super Bowl. 2016 and 2017 we started 2-0 and won the division. So the only time we started 2-0 and didn't win the division was 2005 when we just missed it and got the wild card and won the Super Bowl. But every time under Mike Tomlin that we've started 2-0, we've gone on to win the division. So, starting the season with wins is a great springboard into late in the year. And we've seen the last few years that, the Steelers have – every time in the Mike Tomlin era, the Steelers have missed the playoffs. They've been the first team out. So with the 7th playoff team this year, the chances increase of us making it, but also the chances of getting one of those better seeds is also dramatically increased with a good start to the season.
Yeah, the 2-0 thing is assuring. The 3-0 thing is really nice. The percentage jumps even more of 3-0 teams that eventually make the postseason. So something to keep an eye on there. Ben, any parting shots for Steeler Nation?
Well, I'm watching this Dolphins Jaguars game, and I expected it to be a real stinker. The Dolphins are actually a 3-point underdog, and they're winning big right now, 28-13 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
So yeah, you kind of never know what's going to happen, as Ian alluded to, any given Sunday, where it's like, hey, all these guys are getting paid. They're all really good athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And at any point, somebody you face that you don't think is that great is going to bring their A game, and, you either withstand it and make it work or you don't. And I'm going to reiterate that I think that people are going to look back at that Denver game later on in the season, and they're going to go, that wasn't that bad. It wasn't that big a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And
I agree.
We'll see when that comes. Steelers fans are super patient with the Steelers and Mike Tomlin.
Yes, patience and Steelers fans go hand in hand. Absolutely. Wow. Well, and on that note, good time to get on out of here. 1:00 start on Sunday from Heinz Field, and
10 o'clock.
Sorry,
10 o'clock.
Oh, 10 o'clock if you're on the left coast.
7:30 breakfast, start drinking, and then 10 o'clock football.
Yeah, and so what that means is by like what's that, like 2-3 o'clock Pacific time, you're already in bed and wake up for Monday, right?
No. 2 o'clock.
Kind of.
At 2 o'clock we're having victory beers at the next bar. I mean, you don't.
Well,
you don't just.
Let's
quit
hope
when
so.
The game's over.
I agree with you, Ben. I'd like to see him get off to a good start, and you got an 0-2 team. Just put them down and keep the foot right to the pedal and go from there. But for Ian and Ben, this is Steel Dad signing off on the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by Deck Roofing Incorporated of South Florida. And hey, go Steelers!
Ravens suck. Well, not really, but yeah, they do.